right? It's not a big one.
So next test is next Thursday. 2 days of matrices, 2 days of vectors, a day of review, and then we'll test on Thursday. For seniors, if you're out, well, you'll be here Friday because senior picnic starts after that. If you're out Monday, then watch Schoology and catch up. That's all I can tell you, seniors. Everybody else will be fine. So matrices day 1. Let's copy those 3 down, and then we'll talk about how to use the calculator to put them to. Like everything we do is going to be in the calculator, so it's going to be calculator heavy.
I think I remember these.
I just remember these.
You know what I mean?
So Roman numeral 1, put them in the calculator.
I like that.
But to do that, we have to talk about dimensions first, because you have to know how to tell your calculator what size matrix you want. So the only question really is this first one. I mean, clearly these are 2 by 2. But that first one, is it a 3 by 2 or a 2 by 3?
It's X and Y, so it's a 2 by 3.
It is. How do you know that it's a 3 by 2? You've done them enough times. It's always row by column. Oh, I forgot to bring in an RC Cola today to demonstrate, to help you remember that it's rows and then columns. And columns are up and down, right? Like the White House has big columns out front. Those are up and down things. So it has 3 rows and 2 columns. All right, so let's grab a calculator. Let's clear out the calculus that's going on in there. Anybody find what button we think we should push first?
Second, and then x to the power of -1.
Yes, the button that says matrix, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's press that button and see what that does for us. Sort of top left. Second, matrix. And the first thing we want to do is edit some matrices. We want to put them in the calculator. So let's go over to edit.
1 by 1 needs to be a 3 by 2.
And then I've conveniently labeled them in order to match the calculator. So we'll edit matrix A.
Oh.
And here's the good news. If you get it backwards on the 3 by 2, 2 by 3 thing, like you immediately figure it out. Because when you type in 2 by 3, it posts a 2 by 3 matrix, and then you're like, whoops, I didn't mean 2 by 3. Of course I meant 3 by 2.
Second matrix, which is
It's
under
under math.
yeah.
It's under the green button.
Then you scroll over to edit.
Yeah, I'm on edit, but now
And then
Just hit enter.
Second matrix.
And then you can type and change the numbers.
Edit, and then yes, scroll down to whichever matrix you want. Press enter, and then you can change the numbers. And again, if you get it backwards and you thought it was a 2 by 3, pretty quickly you realize, whoops, that was wrong. 3 by 2, and nobody will be the wiser. And then you just make sure you type them all in there correctly.
Oh, you have to go over to edit. And add that one. 2 by 2.
Double check after you type the matrix in, because the calculator's not going to mess anything up. It's just going to be if you typed a number in wrong or left off a minus sign. So do a quick double check to make sure everything's right.
2 by 2.
And then let's go do that with B and C. So edit B, 2 by 2. And again, do the double check, because that's the only mistake. Like, the calculator's going to do everything. The only mistake that's made is if you type something in wrong. And the trouble is, if you make a mistake entering matrix C wrong, then every problem involving matrix C is going to be wrong. That's kind of a pain for you. Not so much for me. I just mark it wrong and move on. But all right, so are we good with putting them in the calculator?
Yeah.
And again, the only thing you have to know is row by column, and you don't really even have to know that. Because if you get it backwards...
So when does it get...
Definitely not today. Roman numeral 2. Use the calculator.
Wait, but you had to use it to do...
Well, use the calculator to do stuff, I guess, more than just type them in. So let's do matrix B plus matrix C.
Is that you have to go second matrix math?
Second matrix. Not math. I want to use them, so I'm going to go select matrix B. So I'm not editing. I don't want math. That's really complicated stuff that we're not really going to use. I don't want to edit it. I just want to use it. So matrix
B plus...
B, and then plus, and then go get matrix C. Press enter.
I'm just selected without entering the matrix.
Okay, this is where you need to be working in the calculator now to figure out that you know how to hit the buttons.
Yeah, we're...
There's somebody in 4th period, every single test, he comes up and says, how do I, it's always a calculator question.
Yeah.
And he hasn't figured out that I always say, oh, do it like we did in class, knowing that he did not do it in class. And it's fine, he misses it. And he hasn't figured out yet that he needs to do it in class so that when it comes test day, he'll know where all the buttons are.
Well, he's
So
talking
I
about
think
He's staring into your
I
soul.
want to go from edit B to edit C.
Yes, yes. And you have to be careful because you can end up sticking a matrix inside a matrix if you're not careful.
Yeah, I did that.
It's like, wait a minute, what's happening here? Matrix inception going on. All right, are we all good with B plus C?
You can shut up.
All right, let's try A times C. So same steps. Matrix, grab matrix A. And like all the other numbers in multiplying, you can either hit times or you can just stack them right next to each other, and that means times either way.
So our answer would be that.
And your answer is?
C.
AC is good. It keeps us cool.
Isn't there a way to solve these like by hand?
Absolutely, there's a way to do this by hand.
Yeah, but it's the worst, yeah.
The adding one is super easy, just add by position. The multiplying one, you have to do row of the first one times column of the second one. Add those up and put them in that spot, and then row times column
For each number.
for each row and column combination. That's why we're going to use the calculator. Just as kind of a side note, A times C. A is a 3 by 2, and C is a 2 by 2. So the first, the insides, if the insides match, if the inside numbers match, it will work. The outside numbers tell you the dimensions of the new matrix. Dimensions of the product.
So is that just for addition or is that for multiplication?
That's only for multiplication. For addition, they have to match exactly because you're adding by position.
So what if C was 3 by 2?
Then it wouldn't work.
Like, just what you wouldn't be able to... It would just do error?
Probably.
Well, funny you ask. Let's try C times A and see what happens. No, we didn't do that. We did A times C.
And multiplying though. Ah, dim mismatch.
Dim mismatch. You guess what dim stands for?
Dim what?
Dimensions. The dimensions don't work because C is a 2 by 2 and A is a 3 by 2.
But I thought in multiplying you can switch the numbers, but not matrices.
So, yes, 5 times 2 equals 2 times 5.
Yes.
You got that right. But A times C for matrices does not not necessarily equals C times A. I mean,
A was a 2 by 2.
even if they were both 2 by 2s, they wouldn't give you the same.
But it would be a dimension mismatch.
You're right. It wouldn't be a dimension mismatch. They just wouldn't be the same.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few special cases, like if one of them was all zeros, then it would work. But generally speaking, that property that works for numbers does not work for matrices.
Okay.
You don't really have to know that. It takes care of itself. You type it in the calculator, you get dimension mismatch. Like, whoops, doesn't work. It didn't cost you that much time to learn that. Let's find the inverse of matrix B. It's another thing you can do by hand that's kind of a pain by hand, but we'll let the calculator do it. So go grab matrix B. Inversing the matrix. Not inversing, not like flipping each piece of the matrix. We're inversing the whole matrix. Well, so just go B to the -1 and let the calculator do it.
I like that.
Yeah, it's
Right.
not that hard.
There's a way to do it. Some of them are flipped, and some of them have negatives, and some of them change places, but let the calculator do it.
Pretty bad.
And then, depending on what type of answer you want, I know you're familiar with the math frac button. I think you're familiar with the math frac button
Absolutely.
because it turns answers into fractions.
I use it from go to decimal.
But it works for matrices as well. So, I mean, hopefully you could have done that one in fractions on your own, but
Does it need to be when it's cheat? Does the answer need to be a decimal point or fraction, or does it matter?
it doesn't matter unless it asks for it to matter. So, don't think it asks on this.
Because whatever I end up solving and getting is probably what I'm getting.
Now, 3C, that would be just multiplying 3 to each one. So you could do the calculator on that one, but it's probably quicker to just multiply them all by 3 without using the calculator. It's like, why take the time to type it in when all you're really doing is multiplying by 3? Okay, I can handle that.
6, 0, 12.
Let's work the next one off of the homework together. Looking at number 7 on the homework pack. It's a system of equations which you know how to solve using substitution. You know how to solve using elimination. But if you have a calculator and if you know matrices, there's an even better way. We're gonna rewrite this system as a matrix system. So you have a matrix of coefficients. So all you do is pick the coefficients off. Make sure you grab their signs. That's a frequently missed thing.
That looks super familiar.
So 4, -5, -2, 6. And then because of how multiplication works, which we sort of just waved our hands and let the calculator do it, it's row times column. This row times this column, so that would be 4x minus 5y equals -23. So that's sort of the justification for turning these two equations into one matrix equation. -2x plus 6y equals 22. Now, how do we solve that? Normally, if we have Let's just do an easy one here. If we have 5x equals 20, how would you solve that? Divide by 5. You can't divide matrices, though. So what if I said,
Multiply by a fifth.
you don't have division? Tyler, say that again. What would you multiply by?
By a fifth.
You could multiply by the inverse of 5, right? Like you would never write it this way with numbers, right? You would divide by 5 and get 4. But if I told you couldn't divide, you'd multiply by a fifth, which is 5 to the negative 1, and get 4. So we're going to do that with these. Let's call this matrix A. We usually call our variable matrix X, like a capital X. So it's a matrix that includes all of our variables. And then matrix B. And to get X by itself, I can't divide by matrices. That doesn't work. But I can multiply by the inverse. So back to the calculator. I need to edit matrix A to be a 2 by 2. Again, take the time to double check. The calculator's not going to mess it up. It's only going to do what you tell it to. And yes, as somebody noticed, you've got to exit out before
Every time.
Every time you want to put in a new matrix. Otherwise, you end up putting a matrix inside a matrix. And maybe that's cool to think about, but it's going to mess you up. Let's see, is that a 2 by 1 or a 1 by 2?
It's a 2 by 1.
It's not a 1 by 2, so it must be a 2 by 1. Again, if you get them backwards, who cares? You figure it out right away. Negative 23 and 22. And now I want to do A inverse times B. Matrix A inverse. And again, I can put the times in there or I can leave it out. Doesn't matter. Times matrix B. And that should be my answer. So I should just get two numbers there. And there they are. So matrix X is negative 2, 3. But I want to write that as an ordered pair. How do you solve that without matrices?
Yeah, like if
You would solve one of those for X or Y and substitute it into the other. Or you could do elimination and multiply the second one by 2. That way the X's would go away. Remember that? If you multiplied the second equation by 2, you'd get negative 4X. Then you could combine or combination the two equations, and the X's would go away and be able to solve for Y.
So that's how you do it.
So there's substitution, elimination, and now inverses. Inverses being the easiest, as long as you have a calculator.
Do the inverse of B for Y?
The inverse of A times B
But that's for X.
to find X.
How do you find Y?
No, look at what X is. The matrix X.
X is just a variable using it to put the place that's just labeled.
The matrix X includes X and Y.
That's just a
Right? My answer is two numbers, and those two numbers are X and Y.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I
You just
I
use
saw
the
X
X
and I
to
was
label
like,
Why don't you try number 8, and then we'll compare, and then we'll be done.
Of course. That's
In terms of showing work, I want to see the matrix setup. I know it's easy, but I want to see the matrix setup.
Oh, because you have to do the inverse one to get in.
So this other
you'll do an ordered triple. So it looks the same, x comma y comma z. Once you have all three answers. Oh, and if you're in a string of these, you can just go grab A inverse times B again. That way you don't have to mess with all the typing, and tell your calculator, do A inverse times B again. And since you've changed A and B, you should get different answers. And there's your x, y, z. So matrices, especially with a calculator, can be super helpful for solving very complex systems pretty quickly. Right? You probably never even did a 3 by 3 by hand.
So the answer is 1 or negative 3 or positive 5.
I know, yeah, you can
Let's see.
This unit 14